Your Holiness. I will do brief opening. So, Your Holiness, we are so delighted to be back for the second and the final day of these Mind and Life conversations this week. And we're going to continue to explore and go deeper into the theme of compassion, interconnection, and transformation. And we're going to do that through a conversation with you and Pumla Gobodo-Madikizela from South Africa, doing beautiful, beautiful work that you will hear about. And we will also then expand it to a larger conversation with all the group. And before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we have two special guests in the room that you're aware of. But first, Amy Cohen-Varela, who is chair of the Mind and Life Europe board. Thank you for being here, Amy. And Adam Engel. And Adam is Mind and Life Institute co-founder and past chair and president. So welcome, Adam. And to also acknowledge three other people that are young scholars and leaders that we're really fortunate could be here with us. First is Mosa from South Africa, and Mona from India, and Shaguf from Bangladesh. You can stand.
Oh, Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So we're very, very happy that they were here to join us. So I'd like to introduce our moderator for this morning, and it is Aaron Stern. And Aaron is a longtime member of the Mind and Life family. He's a board member. And also his background, he does very deep work in his founding and leading of the Academy for the Love of Learning. So I would pass it over to you, Aaron, to get us started this morning.
Thank you, Susan. Your Holiness, thank you again for welcoming all of us into your home. It's an honor to be here. You recall that we had a wonderful conversation on Wednesday with David. We spoke about evolutionary biology. This most amazing topic. And today we turn our attention to something you speak about often. 7 billion people, warm-heartedness coming together with the mind, with the brain. And so from South Africa, we have this most amazing exemplar.
That's very nice photograph, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
You want to see? I always keep this. Now I'm wondering, where's his rebirth?
Yes, thank you. Warm-heartedness and the brain coming together, yes. And so today we'll have an opportunity to hear from Pumla, who I will formally introduce in just a moment, about the work that Pumla is doing in South Africa. And we'll have a chance to explore that and listen to the stories and the research that Pumla is doing. So, let me introduce Pumla. I've been practicing saying this name so that I say it correctly. Pumla Gobodo-Madikizela.
Wonderful.
Now you. No.
I usually not much pay attention name or background, so country or religious. So long, see human face.
Yes.
And that is the best way to introduce we are a human being.
Yes.
So some people is very much sort of insist
On titles.
introduce their own name or this or under rank and these things.
Titles.
I don't care.
That's good.
Anyway, Africa, one big continent, great continent. You see, now Africa, at previous time, people, mainly European exploitation. But basically, Africa, great continent, great potential. So, I'm very happy, one African. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll say just a few more things about Pumla. I have all these things to say. So, Your Holiness, I'm going to just say some things from the program that are important to Pumla and to the community in which Pumla lives and is part of. She's the research chair. And so Pumla is a social scientist, a clinical psychologist, and the research chair at Stellenbosch University. And the topic is in historical trauma and transformation. And she was a...
가서 historical trauma 소리.
로규가 돈에 강한테 되거든요.
가.
미리 로규가 돈에 미리 조 강한테
알레, 오래
되거든요.
되지.
드라마 하대 저 주대 셋업 치다는데 주고 뭐랑 미세익 들으셔.
And she was a member of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and is a dear colleague of Archbishop Tutu, your dear friend. And out of the work that Pumla did in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, a great deal of research and learning that she did with this extraordinary researcher's mind. She wrote a very important book. And I'll give you the exact title. It's a very important book to read. A Human Being Died That Night.
That's a human being.
디니모드 미시브를 했지로. 디니모드 미시브를 했을 때 그다가 아파트에다 되게 돈에 강한테 이제 가다 미리리아 제가 임진단 지체로 갔다 그다 미소도 맞네 시브스르지.
A South African story of forgiveness, which later became a play that was performed in theaters in New York, in Cape Town, and in London, reaching many, many people. So I have this very long list of awards. I mean, this is the short biography. But rather, let me introduce you to Pumla and invite Pumla to speak now. And my feeling is that you will experience Ubuntu, this deep experience of African wisdom that lives through Pumla and is expressed in the work that she does, just by her very humanity. So,
Right.
Pumla. Yes.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Thank you, His Holiness. First, thank you so very much for allowing me to be in this space in your home, taking the time to be with us here, to be in conversation with me. I'm deeply grateful for that. I bring you greetings from your friend, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and Mrs. Leah Tutu, his wife. I was with them last Monday at their retirement home, about 2 hours from Cape Town. I visited them to share with them that I'm going to be on this trip. They were delighted, and they said I should give you their heartfelt greetings. They love you so much. Their daughter was there and her husband. And he was thrilled that I will be sitting next to you. So I'm very grateful to you and to him for the example of humanity, that you live your lives in this compassion to the world. It's been a great guiding light for me in my work, in my life, and I feel so connected to you through Archbishop Tutu. Having been with him and being so connected with him, I feel already that I'm connected to you. So thank you very much. Your Holiness, I've been asked today to speak about my work on Ubuntu, especially how I have connected it to the work of forgiving that has emerged from what we did at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I want to start off by describing it as something that is usually contrasted in the scholarship, in the philosophical literature. It's usually contrasted with the Cartesian idea that I think, therefore I am. Ubuntu starts from the premise that the notion of a unitary individual is based on a false premise.
That
subjectivity, our human subjectivity, is connected, is interconnected to the world of others, to the community, our communities, inextricably bound to others. Your friend, Archbishop Tutu, in his book, No Future Without Forgiveness, puts it very succinctly, very powerfully. He says, my humanity caught up is inextricably bound in yours. And that's a powerful context within which to begin the conversation about this notion of Ubuntu. And Your Holiness, I'll say it in my language first, and then I'll translate it. I'll say what it means. In my language, we say, Umntu ngumntu ngabanye abantu. Literally, that means a person is a human being or becomes a human being through other people. It's this idea of the inextricably boundedness of the world. Which means the richness of our subjectivity, of who we are as human beings, is always in relation to others. Human beings always in relation to others. And what it means in practice is that we care for others, always care for others enough to want them to become human beings as well. And this is why when Nelson Mandela came out of prison, he insisted that this concept of Ubuntu becomes a part of our constitution after apartheid. It was built into the constitution. And so all our policies, human rights policies, the courts, and even the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, on which Archbishop Tutu presided, that policy was very much designed around the idea that we are now proceeding after apartheid from this separation to a process that connects us. And the principle that guided that work was this principle of Ubuntu, the interconnectedness. Now, Your Holiness, I want to share with you some of the richness, because I think that the Truth Commission was the platform that for us demonstrated what Ubuntu in action means, what it means actually to practice Ubuntu. Now, this was part of the Constitution. It was part of the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, that we shall be guided by this principle of interconnectedness. And so the very approach of people, for instance, who committed crimes, in conversation, encountering people whom they had hurt, either by killing their loved ones or torturing them, the idea was that we're setting aside the principle of vengeance, and we are looking up to the possibility.
Tashele lopa shaje now kada jikta never kenye ta never kesa niga tuya kokapsuje now.
That the work is guided by this possibility that we can connect as human beings. So I want to share with His Holiness now some examples that demonstrate, that illustrate the work of this Ubuntu, this concept of Ubuntu. And I choose an example that I use all the time because it has all the elements. It's got the language, it's got the culture, it's got all these nuances that are important for us to understand what Ubuntu is. And it's an example from an experience of a group of women, of mothers, whose children were murdered by the police, security police of the apartheid government. They had not done anything. They were young Black people wanting change in their lives, and they were just identified by the police, and they used a Black person to lure them, to bring them into this, where the police could kill them.
Kada mere nabu jelia robo zeje kuzu dike da saja kujo jelia ti and the America police apartheid police can kuzu severs the ti onye de nabu jerislam.
And so the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was a process where people shared their experiences of this past, and these mothers came to the commission to tell the story of the loss of their children. And this man who was responsible for the murder of their loved ones was also at the Truth Commission. He asked to meet with the mothers. He asked us to organize a conversation, a dialogue with the parents, because he wanted to ask for their forgiveness. And when
Gondas laya kokapter slabresa tan mere nabu tan tirunya jorba. The quote the machine pushi pushine to the amatuda tuya kokapjumbana kogondas laya.
And I want to share some moments in this meeting between the mothers and this young man. So he approaches them, and the mothers are very angry at him. Why did you do this? You're a Black person. How could you betray your own Black people? And so there's a moment in this course of this very tense period where the young man turns to the mothers and says, "My parents," and I want to say it in my language, Your Holiness, because it's more powerful in my language. So he turns to them and says, "Bazali bam." And when someone says, "Mzali wam, bazali bam," they are addressing them directly, as almost like calling their responsibility as parents on this person who's now begging for forgiveness. And when he says this,
amala juma member cheche susu ama imba chege dushe ke tanye ji oresti peju chebe kabla ya ani nye de lamsa amen dushe sandanya we de yoya de koyoros de tsik tone ke wal duslam.
And there's a moment there when the mothers, hearing the words, this man calling them Bazaliba, my parents, one of the mothers turns to him and says, "My son, you are the same age as my son." And that moment where she calls him my son, it opens up something in the room, because all the other mothers now are connecting with this man in the language of him being the son. And to me, this captures exactly this idea of the possibility that you can transcend yourself, even if you are wounded, you are hurt, you're carrying this trauma. There is always this possibility that you can relate to this person, even this person who caused you so much harm, that there is always this possibility. And Ubuntu, it seems to me, is that potential, that possibility that this can happen. And so my work, Your Holiness, has emerged now from trying to understand forgiving and moving into a space where I've been thinking about how do we understand this notion of possibility in these relationships after so much brokenness in our country. And I'm working on a concept of repair, that it seems to me that
repairs to
repair that, beyond forgiving, you are repairing, and the idea of repairing is something that you have to do every day. You've got to be conscious and mindful of the pain that is always out in the world, that you're constantly conscious of doing good, being caring. And that idea calls us, it's an idea that calls us to be ethical human beings, to approach one another with the warmness of the heart, as you say, as you call it. So, Your Highness, I think I will end there with my story, and thank you very much.
Wonderful. 그 치기의 체전에도 그런 안전함이 일단 저다 미 전주스를 되는 전자와이죠, 봐.
네.
만난 게 사다냐면 사로. 그 치코는 누구 실수가.
네. It's very true that the words in the right time carry so much power, and the right word that you choose in that specific context makes a big difference. That's to sort of draw a parallel in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, which takes the Bodhisattva teaching seriously, when emphasis is on universal compassion, and then sometimes part of that practice involves thinking of all beings as mother-sentient beings, and even using the word mother. And when you use that, there is a power.
So, Your Holiness, you are reminding me.
그 견자를 말견 섬저 탐지스러나 책 실수가 상이야. 파견 섬저 탐지스러고는 대보스kim 또 있네.
The funny thing here is that when you use the word mother-sentient beings and think about it, it really has power. But if you try to replace it and say father-sentient beings, it doesn't seem to have that power.
가다 미리야 마이 자와세티 시우지 계시고 입이 타임 소용도.
So this probably indicates how important the mother's love is, mother's affection is for human beings at such a fundamental level.
And Your Holiness, this is what you're reminding me of, is that in this relationship between the mothers and this young man, something happened to the mothers. When I went back to research, now I've gone back to them to understand when is that moment of transition, of transformation, digging deeper, probing deeper, and the mothers take me to their bodies, and they describe what they call in my language, it is inimba. And inimba is the cord that connects a child to the mother. It's the umbilical cord, but it's actually much more than that.
Koranjo tanyi joresa tanat mo keje yangsa TVs interazo puki tugal yata juwat de yongwe ke kap kandejili ya ani kolia kanda sobeke ya dati chungsung keje TV kalia ani subu nalo ya juwa yobe shigdos lug nalo juwa ani juwa de kareslab juga koranjo tanyi de inimbas ya mada pote tedero pote te takpal kogorsa takpatel kogorsa this is subutone.
And they describe how this was evoked, Inimba was evoked, and that helped them. When I asked them about the moment of transformation, and they said this Inimba is what connects them. And what's interesting, Your Holiness, is that the mothers say to me that it's not even the connection to the men who killed their loved ones, but it's the connection to their mother, even in her absence.
Tana puti zammayin ba putiga amale ningji gebe sorchi. Kishik dos amata tonda tonsa stay ne koranjo choyong dante.
So this presence of this mother, and feeling her through their bodies, and which then allowed them to connect via this third presence of a mother who they know because they are mothers too, and finding a connection via her to the son and being able to open up to the son in this generous way that they did. So I'm very interested now, Your Highness, in the role of the body, how important our body is in these relationships of interconnectedness. And it makes sense to me because this is how we come to the world. We are born first in our bodies. We enter the world in our bodies. And so when we relate to one another, the role of the body in these relationships.
가도 루심 저거데 되게 유효로 루심 저거데 자상가다 심기 주당 타네 룰리야 슈긴 티요
나래
다 룰리 차네
하게 되면로
땅으로 가서래 아마 저 소수 류디 근데 아메 다 가서 류네 채버려라 아니 가다 제네 더 가지는요 근데 아메 류도 저기 짜체 진짜인데 해봐요
So in general, of course, we now know that mind and body are very closely intertwined and interconnected. And particularly the effect of experience at the level of emotion and mind affects the body. That is kind of, incontrovertible now, and science kind of recognizes it. But there might be also a way in which the body itself affects the mind, affects the emotion. And that would make sense because when we come out of our mother's womb, for the first few months, this tight physical hugging and contact with the mother is such a formative part of our experience. And that has to have left a powerful impact on our nature of our experience.
Yes.
Pumla, I'm wondering if you might share a little bit about this mutual responsibility and accountability that sits within this amazing Ubuntu view and philosophy.
This for me
그래서
is,
저 그래
드르시다나디 우분투 돈 때베나 간다 네베게냐다 네베게서 니가리야
For humanity.
편준 두두 임바시다 아니
For each other's
냠바 소야다
humanity.
초니게 돈에 되고 공유 버셔와 그때스 세세 십치로 지났어.
this for me, Your Highness, Your Holiness, is a very important aspect of Ubuntu, this idea that we are responsible and accountable for one another. And the importance is really in ensuring that we don't consider others as monsters. When people, for instance, murder and torture under apartheid, they dehumanize the self first. So they're doing these deeds by dehumanizing themselves. And so when we are responsible in a spirit of Ubuntu, when we are responsible for the other, we are really accountable to re-invite them, readmit them into the world of moral humanity, that this is a chance for them to become human beings, moral human beings, and to shed their de-individuated kind of selves that they use, or rather dehumanized selves that they used. So this is important.
아니 지난 거는 시대가 책이 동안 책이 아프리카다 사우스 아프리카 책이 해주기로 책. 다 아프리카 다시 뭐 쉬우시죠. 있다. 얘는 그 루버 맨날 나는 찌르 책이 책이요. 야말에.
So Holiness is wondering the word Ubuntu because of its importance, critical importance in your tradition. In South Africa, that seems to be the key word. And he was wondering whether in other parts of Africa, other words are used, but which is all trying to point towards a kind of a more universal principle or quality.
Yeah, so many problems. East Africa, West Africa, Northern Africa, more Arab, something like that. A lot of problems in Central Africa.
Your Holiness, the word Ubuntu is common, this root Ubuntu. It's very common on the continent. I do a lot of work in Rwanda, for instance, and there they have the same word they use. They call it Ubumuntu. So it's always the root is there. And even now in Rwanda, with their own work of trying to bring about transformation in the country, they're using that word. They brought it into their work of dealing with the past of the genocide in Rwanda. And this idea that now people are recognized as human beings, they have no excuse because now they have to be accountable to their community, to one another. And this is the call. So it's a word that's common, but it's a word that people have ignored. And it's a word that positions us as connected to others, but somehow through laws and policies and processes of hate, people have become separated. But these processes, such as the Truth Commission and in Rwanda, what they are doing, they are trying to reconnect, to remind people about their responsibility to their communities. So that is what
Moranega Chitirisha, Shell never came so Panangon never gets at the Seva that the Dek to Tamatri Chigiyoba in Zugala, Tartu Susule Negores, never came Koran, never came Koranga, me casual ticket, Dore Danje, the Chitugal me casual land of yours. Things are the Penju Niga two Chikichel Sebatana, Sebata, Sebal Lomba Chichebina, never came Koranjane, me Betsavet, me casual ticket, the last of two grace, Tatirisha Negar.
The Africa, as I mentioned earlier, huge continent. So basically, can you say some different group and with different language? Can you say how many?
Broadly speaking, kind of.
Kada saji jachum shujir bata. Chazong kada digi kya kazisjana.
So His Holiness is wondering, because it's such a huge continent, broadly speaking, how many language groups are there?
Sure. That is very difficult. In my country, there are 11 languages in my country.
So are there native written scripts for the native languages?
Written languages.
Yeah.
But
some of them, of course, later kind of Romanized scripts are adopted. But are there traditional scripts?
It's the alphabetical, it's the normal, normal, it's the understood alphabetical language, because it's drawn from an oral culture that has been developed into written form. Except in other countries, for instance, that use Arabic language, so languages that have specific forms of writing.
His Holiness is saying that this is more of an aside, but the earliest writing script was, he was wondering whether it emerged in China or in India.
Any idea? I don't know.
I don't know. I know that the lot has been written by our people in terms of just the vision of who we are, and the vision of, the idea of freedom, the kind of freedom that people want. There's lots that has been written, but in terms of the form of writing, it's been very much using the alphabet, the English alphabet.
Your Holiness, as I listened to this conversation, one of the last things that Pumla mentioned before we talked about language briefly was the structures and the systems in place that continue to separate people, when you spoke of Rwanda, for example. And certainly where I live in the United States, in a post-colonial society that still has the systems in place that continue to separate us, cause competition between us, dehumanize us. How can we take the inspiration from Pumla's work and your own work and bring that into application in the midst of
그래서
kada mul lega ta dan kuduna ka mangbo domi chi ku kana ya da tu tone lecture lenje da de zamli na lo da yemje shu dang ge orwa di da di kada di donglen che che di dokdop kitab she tablan be ya kar chashi kar na sta la len ta ya ro che
yeah.
좀 하서 그래.
Yes.
First, and then you.
ya ma shi morale ka
나도 미치는 집어로다.
lare
로미
lare. But one simple fact is the moment when you talk about humanity, we are all talking about the same people. Yeah.
I think simple thing is you can marry and can produce nice children. So that means we are same.
So across the differences.
Everywhere. Oh.
So 7 billion human beings, mentally, emotionally, physically, we are same. And ancient time, of course, you see, within one country, you see the different part of the country, small community. They simply, almost I think, based on family level.
Tribes, tribes.
Huh? So that's the situation in ancient time. Now time passes, now connection with the other and increasing. That immense benefit to oneself. Now today, we are 21st century. With the help of technology and modern economy, no national boundary. So that brings, and then on top of that, the ecology,
Environment.
or global warming. So we, entire humanity, entire world, now, I mean, same,
So many of the challenges that we experience are actually collective challenges that we face as human beings.
I think century old, I think your language also there must be there. I, me, we. Now today, I, me cannot sort of increase.
Expand.
Just one individual. Now the word we. Now today, entire 7 billion human beings are part of we. So, the rest of the people unhappy, lot of problem. One individual. I think even animal, social animal, one of their member dying, the rest of the group, showing
The concern, sadness. It's almost like kind of showing sadness. Say they mourn the death.
So we are social animal. 자상하다, 전부링, 자, 미디리, 뭐는지, 디기 내버리지, 매나 소소치고, 저 가지는 셈 맞지.
So if the rest of the humanity are not, they're suffering, then there's simply no possibility that one person as an individual can actually enjoy and experience happiness.
So because of that reality, 랑디치고 삼다는 동행 그랬지. 셴디 삼다는 대화용 그랬지.
So because of that fact, in the Buddhist teachings, it said that if an individual chooses to focus only on his or her own interest, then it leads to misery, more misery and suffering. But if the individual shifts the focus and takes concern about others' well-being as well, then that opens the door to happiness.
So now differences, nationality, color, religion, these are secondary. When we born, no religion, nationality not much sort of relevant at the time of birth. Entire 7 billion human being is in the way, same way born and the same way taken care by mother. And then finally, same way die. No differences. And then mentally want happiness, do not want suffering. Even animal also same. And because of that nature feeling, on that basis, we can say that's our right. So we humanity, and including animal, everyone have the right be sort of peaceful life. So now today's world, just like one human community, and then humanity becoming more compassionate, then limitless animals also then reduce their suffering, like fishing and beef farm.
Beef, animal farms. Yeah.
There's no feeling of other animal. If human being more compassionate, and then the India's tradition, ahimsa, not harming other, including animal. So now, because of education, we can change human thinking and this narrow-minded thinking. Through education, we can
open the eyes now.
Oh. So then, most of the religion usually carry the message of love. But religion is in many people's eye. Religion is something that
Old. From the past, yeah.
And worst thing is, with the name of religion, killing each other. That's the worst sort of
image.
No.
So that actually gives a very bad image to many people. Yeah, feeling that religion is not only irrelevant, but they're dangerous too.
Oh, unless you see you get some, you gain some experience. Otherwise, you say, look, religion is additional sort of the
source of
trouble,
division.
Division. So better no religion. But then, other hand, if you think more seriously, then all religion carry the message of love. With that, forgiveness, tolerance, contentment, self-discipline. All major religious tradition you see carry this message. So this message very relevant the human society.
Your Holiness, I wonder what in your tradition we were talking earlier, or I shared earlier, the idea of how the body becomes connected to these relationships. And I wonder in your tradition, what are the examples that show this role of the body, whether there is any role that the body, awareness of the importance of the body?
Murangita the researcher, the Jenambe Shune Shake the Yorves, Suburangita, and the same get Wata, Nusubugu, Luke, the Luke, Kejukoton, Yamyokoton.
Dr. Lucien John, you're
Lord Jodu, but that's it.
in it.
Shinjanda is the Chicago.
The Kasha Kashimoto Yaba.
Laril.
Government to go. Because the prisoner says, Mongus, you're slept with mother, Chick Tandas, Chick Zuzus, at the Kautua.
So there, of course, in the text, there's a when describing heightened states of, meditative mind. There's a description of what is called the physical pliability, where you feel your body is very flexible. There's a kind of a quality of bliss that comes to it. So I was bringing that example, but it's only said yes, but that's only for a few people. And then he was reminding me that there are a lot of descriptions like this in the text, but we can only say, yes, there are. But then when you ask, give me an example, there's not many to show around.
So now I feel the scientific research. So
the advantage of bringing invoking science is that they are not happy with simply statement that yes, there are things like that. They want to test, they want to measure, and then they want to demonstrate.
So this kind of meeting with scientists, and we all have the same sort of responsibility, same goal. And then through different profession to create better world, happier world. So now here, as I mentioned, I think the other day, according to some sort of report, I think at least 10, 15 years ago, I saw one article. Then about 6 billion human population, so 1 billion non-believer. So these also, you see, part of humanity and important. And many of them is criticize religion. It's quite true. Unless the religious follower implement what religion teach us. That's few. Many cases, religion just a name. Or in church, few moment, close eye, seems to some practice of religion. Outside church, nothing. We Buddhists also, you see, in the temple, yes, and outside. 미치고 말이 소자 참으로 차단이 따르고 너도 성은 참을 차단들이.
The biggest source of problem for not just us human beings but also other animals are really the twin forces of attachment and aversion. And especially for humans,
그래서 마이서로 어렸을 때 딱 가다 뽑은 이야기를 찍디 차단 걸로디 취미식 남도를 기워 취미식 남도서야지 등을 매줘지 남도 조단지 저 참보다 자와도 서버서야지 균형되는 조사야지 다들 개와 쉬우시도.
So Holiness was saying that one thing that really gives him hope and courage is the fact that if you dig deeper, many of these emotions that causes us problem like strong attachment or hatred, if you dig deeper, they're actually built on very false perception of reality. So whereas if you contrast them with the more positive qualities like loving kindness or compassion or concern for others or empathy, those emotions are actually founded on a much more solid basis and they're closer to reality. Therefore, there is hope for us so that we can reinforce the positive ones and actually lessen the force of the negative ones, destructive ones.
get again, tag in the Zambaimba. Using bu, and Kevin Katoa, Chadangulu, Chagbe, that temperature than the Jukuati, in a Chizangi, Chapashuk check turkey, any Ramshaw the Shenshaw, Shedan, Topa Tesum, did Mali.
No.
Tazanga.
So
Namju sometimes.
So when dealing with these powerful forces in us, which are very natural, strong attachment and aversion and hatred, the role of intelligence and using wisdom becomes very important to be able to see the short-term and long-term consequences, to be able to see the pros and cons. And so by using these, then, for example, if you look at attachment seems to arise, experience as something positive, that you are being attracted to something and you want to own it, you want to grab it. But the problem of attachment is that there is a flip side, because attachment is to the side that you like. The flip side is hatred or anger and aversion towards the one that you don't like. So attachment actually underpins hatred and anger and other forces as well. So to regulate and deal with these emotions, you really need to use your wisdom and intellect.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the forces that underpin these emotions are important for human beings, because if you are completely apathetic, then the person is almost like a kind of a robot. He's got no feeling.
Well, Your Holiness, this is a wonderful time for us to open to the rest of the group. And Richie Davidson, your beloved friend and our beloved scientist and chief scientific advisor for Mind and Life, is going to put on a microphone and come up here and join us and invite the rest of the group into conversation and
So
join
Richie,
us.
Richie, you want to pull your chair there?
Yeah. Yeah. Or you.
Mike, sit there, baby. And is it going to get one? Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe David should come here. Yeah. It's okay. Thank you. With the camera, yeah.
He wants you to.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's talk him now.
Thank you, Your Holiness, and thank you, Pumla, for your amazing work. I'd like to begin by just reflecting a little bit on some of Pumla's work, Your Holiness. In her book that Aaron mentioned, there are these extraordinary examples of her interviews with some of the perpetrators of the apartheid violence. And the encounters that she describes of moments where the perpetrators are facing the victims or the relatives of the victims in this process of repair that she describes are some of the most granular and rich descriptions from a phenomenological perspective of the possibility of human transformation. And she has described these moments when there is something that shifts, and it may be associated with a word. For example, the mother referring to the perpetrator as her son. And so in this work, there is embedded within it, I think, some precious insights about what are the necessary and the sufficient conditions for human transformation. And this is transformation from the impact of really horrific violence and trauma to a repair process that has the possibility of actually promoting flourishing. And so this is really a question for both of you to reflect on what may be the necessary and the sufficient conditions for human transformation. So maybe, Pumla, you can start, and then we can turn it to His Holiness.
His Holiness mentioned something very important earlier when we were talking about attachment. That sometimes attachment becomes the very start of division, of hatred of another, because you're attached to something you know. In answer to your question, in terms of the moments, I also want to draw on something that His Holiness said, that at those moments, it is the wisdom that invites us to transcend the self. That there is, the inclination is that I'm attached to this. It's almost out of love for one's loved one that one hates. And sometimes it's also because of one's love for one's loved ones that one rises beyond that. And what makes that possible is an awareness, is a going back to that wisdom. How can I respond differently at this particular moment? And if we have these possibilities that define what it is to be human, you can restore this relationship, but almost by transcending this desire, almost the inclination towards the attachment, so that the very thing that you love becomes the very thing that helps you to transcend the inclination. And so I find in my work that really it is about the caring. We draw on the wisdom is, how do we become all the time? How do we become better? How do we build a sense of community? How do we build our community or rebuild or restore our community? It's that consciousness, it's that commitment to that ethical, command to become ethical human beings one to another. That's what I think allows us to break that kind of connection.
지단다는 군주가 남아나시래 차별이디 랑조다 신조 임제다에 시간 두고 was 그때에는 차바디 돈에 랑기 년다 들 제외 유디고라 매풀 제외 더부샤샤베나 제외 되기 시제제 미신다질이야 제외 체토야게 고갑절하게 was 데데가블야 아니야 직 저문에 기운되고라 남주지 냐보 연구에서 디인되고라 아니야 랑다 신기 초기 총다디 라와들 대제 바나물이야 대외 체토야지 There is
one issue embedded in this that I think is really important, that both your work, Pumla, and I think the Buddhist framework has something to say about this, and that is you have described these poignant moments that represent these epiphanies or insights in the course of the repair work. And in the Buddhist context, maybe there are certain times during particular practices where there are insights that occur. And the question is, how can we take those momentary insights and convert them into something that is sustained And in the language of science, what we're talking about here is the transition from a state, which is something that is transient, into a more enduring virtue.
영어 되게 참
가사.
영어 되게 참 내가 쟁어와 내가 치라바 쟁어 영어래 영어 띵사부 제베네 내가 치라 쟁어 영어래 되네 다 체리 돈에 셰베나 영어 상부 되게 되네 균내제 미 코레 자베 시글 존로야지 sambushi oresta ka state the trade chayak that delia tapshe karayonas.
지금 금지 말이야, 금지.
So here the key factor is really habituation, familiarizing.
아주 좀 유자하게 저는 시럽 시행주잖아요. 투중기 시럽, 성중기 시럽, 금중기 시럽.
So for example, in the Indian tradition, when they speak about the progression of knowledge and deepening of knowledge or experience, one looks at it in three different levels. The initial stage, your understanding may be just a hearsay, something that you have heard, something that you have read. And then as you deepen it through critical reflection, you get to
Then the point to which you already heard. Then
you reflect.
analyze by yourself. Then that brings deeper understanding through your own analyze.
And your own inquiry. So there is a sort of an integration, like a conclusion.
Then conviction.
Conviction arises.
Just understand from hearing. One day, someone told, and you felt, oh, wonderful. But then next day, another person say different. Then, but the second level of understanding, because you yourself analyze. Then conviction there. Then someone else, you see, tell
Another story.
the different sort of version. Then you feel, oh no, I deeply analyze. That actually brings some benefit. So sometimes feel pity about the other person.
For their view, for their opposite view. And then the third level.
Then familiarize often. Then real feeling comes.
So the third level, the key factor is
The
there is the experience.
신에게 간다. 지금 섬중 전달자를 양양 삼다는 아니 생각 띵네 예반이를 수준한테 금중 스페셜로 조리.
So as a result of long critical reflection, internalization, and all of this, once conviction arises, and the more you familiarize with that way of thinking or perspective, then at one point, when you actually bring it into your mind, there is a feeling, an emotion that accompanies it. That's when there is a felt sense of experience. That's when it has become really integrated.
I wonder, Pumla, if there is an analogous process in the repair work that you've done that corresponds to what His Holiness described in the Buddhist framework.
I'm very intrigued by this idea of engaging reflectively, with what one knows. It's very relevant in my work and certainly in terms of the experience in South Africa, because we live in such a divided society, and what people need to do and what I mean by this idea of repair is precisely this idea of constant engagement and reflection on what does it mean to connect to someone who is my enemy? What is the benefits to my community? And just that exposure to the goodness of life, to the possibility that my children, because we've got to think transgenerationally in this context. And I've seen this in Rwanda, in communities where people are living as neighbors with people who kill their loved ones. And in that context, this idea of engaging reflectively on what does it mean that we are now living as neighbors, killers and victims, with our children growing up together, is that possibility of peace. And that's the reflection, the repair, that this is the possibility that we can constantly think about tomorrow is going to be a better day than it was in the past. This idea of, repairing every day and witnessing the fruits of that repair. And so in relation to His Holiness' third level of knowledge. It's that sense of now I'm witnessing the change and the difference. And therefore, this approach to dealing with the past must be right. There must be something in it. And so it works in that way. But I think that the way that His Holiness is analyzing it is so important to bring to communities so that people can think about it. Because sometimes people are living the experience without reflection. And yet when we bring them down to exactly these levels of analysis and convey this to people, that this is what it means, then people can work with it and see why it's working. Because often people say, oh, no, it's not possible, it's beyond my purpose. But the way that His Holiness has described it, I find it so helpful.
And I want to share with you, I think, genuine loving kindness, not the ranjun zilchedi. Dinge nyi, dinge chogu yin cheni, zawa di peji chakwa tsorisha. Ta jada u chashana. Dinga naba jegi yorba. Ri yin korang dunge mi duba da dewan daba nga ta jikba res. Jiri yi da de dewa da dengo re, dunge da chagwa res, da di
So one sort of important point is how to tease out genuine compassion and love out of attachment. So, and for example, we naturally feel love and kindness and compassion towards our loved ones, but often those are mixed with attachment because there is a self-reference. Animals also have that level of. So because the key factor here is there is a self-reference. Such and such is a my child, such and such is a my friend, such and such is a my community. So there is a self-referential dimension to
That's not genuine compassion, but very much related with attachment.
So on the other hand, through cultivation, you can imagine the possibility of having a genuine sense of concern for someone who has done something horrible to you, a so-called enemy. And that is based upon the simple recognition that just like myself, this person too is a human being who do not want to suffer, who wishes to be happy. And on that basic recognition, if you're able to extend an empathy and feel a sense of concern, that is a true compassion, that's a genuine compassion. And there is no regarding underpinning considerations in that relationship, in that attitude.
So that through training, so
the second type can only be arisen on the basis of cultivating it, reflection, looking at it from many different angles and comparison to, recognizing humanity in the other person, all of this. So that is something that has to be cultivated, the learned, attitude.
With this human brain, I think only human being can do that, no other animal. So, I think 1,000-year-old India's tradition, ahimsa, karuna,
compassion, non-violence and compassion. So in the Indian tradition, when they promote principles of non-violence and compassion, they're not talking about just your friends and family. They're really talking about the broader humanity.
And ahimsa is in
fact, the very principle of non-violence and non-harming is really, it has not much to do with your family, because from family you don't expect harm. So it's actually already built in the very concept, is an attitude towards people who cause you harm.
So it's view.
Yeah.
It sounds like necessary conditions have to do with view.
What did you say?
View.
남쪽 삼다나 ran jide dungin chini ba tigu rangde delation jide dewa shim tigu shen delishati jumzen de paredo ti jumzen yang samdani and kosumna dilemudo.
Yes, it is. And it's really, a lot of these convictions will arise as a result of reflection and, bringing all sorts of examples and, reasoning. And as stated before, there is a statement in the Buddhist text which says that everything that is good in the world actually comes from consideration of others' welfare. Everything, miserable in the world functions of excessive self-focus, self-centeredness.
In Pumla's work, you say that it's responsibility and accountability to the humanity of the other is an inherent part of view in the way one sees and cultivating that.
And extending the self to the other. It's very much the framework of Ubuntu is about concern for the even in other you don't know. The example of the mothers and Inimba, for instance, is a concern for someone who's not even present. So it's the sense of reaching out to another, extending oneself to connect with another.
I'm curious to know whether the training component that His Holiness refers to, that in order to extend beyond one's family in this way, some kind of more systematic training is important. And I wonder if that's something that has been built into the work that you've been doing in South Africa, and if this notion of training perhaps elicits a new way of thinking about this that could be incorporated.
I've wondered about that, and I've come to the conclusion that the idea of training could work in some contexts, but in a context where issues are social, political, and all of the nuances that come into play, we need to think for something more than training, to think more about experience. We were talking the other day, Your Holiness, about the possibility of spaces such as this. That the training is one thing, but even with training in mind, to bring people into contexts such as these ones, and to share these examples, and to get people to experience one another, that is the power of this work. It's in witnessing others, witnessing this work in action. And this is why the Truth Commission was successful on some level, because there was a sense of witnessing of what's possible through others' transformational, transformation work.
Gerge lo chae nyam gerge kana mi gerbe so to na lo chae de nyam bol ya mi penjun dewe to ne de che nyam nyo yo e ko kap je ku dos the truth reconciliation de shu chi kada cha so yo e de ko mi penjun dewe che sa ko kap je ber was de de to ne ke ba to gerge lo chang nyam bol ya nyam nyo ko kap de je ku dos na
Keep down.
Yes.
His Holiness is inviting Santorumachi if he wants to say something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Come back to it.
Oh, microphone. Yeah. Oh, may I put it here?
Yes. Thank you.
Well, it's very difficult for me to say something because my bad language, and also I'm not very studied about this mental trainings. Well, you are listening to your conversation. I just remember one incident happened with Mahatma Gandhi when he was the second roundtable conference in London. A British priest met him and said that the Bible says you must love your enemy as well. You must love your neighbor and also you should love your enemy. But Gandhi kept quiet. And then he again repeated that worse, then Gandhi says, yes, I'm agree to that, but difficult with me is that I have no enemies.
And the issue lama jig tana Gandhi England paper kapte training kapte issue lama jig kan Jesus kitika na yores susu kimzeli ya zewa sheba zuno ma dale zewa sheba res je ningji sheba res kana yores and Gandhi kema sung bores ko lama de kyap to ji chebin sarwa and Gandhi kita ine the temper de na nga kan ngi tus kaza ngalia data na mes kana yores.
So the extension of self to entire sentient being is the basic teaching of Bodhisattva practice. And by this way, to love to a particular group or particular section of the sentient beings is not the great compassion. The great compassion means no differentiation between any group or any particularity. So that can only come, you do the cultivation, practice, and to habitualize it. So it is long process of training in the Bodhisattvacharya.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe
then to do some study na rang zao de any rang dong mi de ma de wan de ji ye bin ji san ne pa ji zao san de li yu.
In fact, the sense of concern for your own well-being, which is really the basis for your ability to empathize with others, is there because our basic disposition is to not to wish to suffer, but wish for happiness. So that's a very basic disposition, and that's why there is a sense of concern for our own well-being, which then forms the basis for you to reach out and connect with others.
and we
刚才
talk
民主超过那什么ji，刚才让了zao de ye ni ni so so错过了。
So, I mean, since, human
So just
evolution, human evolution began, in fact, one would say that all sentient creatures, there is this basic kind of drive for self-protection, and in fact, also self-preservation and, drive for flourishing. And this really is the very, very rudimentary, fundamental, basic reality.
And this we refer to as innate basic goodness. This is the fundamental basis for innate basic goodness.
가자.
在为上周是的地下我的上
这这
上边的啷。
Pumla, is there that ethic of self-care inherent in Ubuntu?
It's not self-care that is individualistic. It's self-care that you might say it's self-interested care for the other, because it is in the way that other human beings are constructed that bestows a responsibility on me, to reach out to humanity. In other words, it's a kind of a selfish, care for the self to the extent that I want others to be human.
I see.
I want this community to be human so that I can be human as well. So it's a reciprocal mutuality
Beautiful.
that really defines these relationships.
There are a number of others that wish to ask questions. Maybe put up your hand so Ellen
I think
knows.
David has it. Yeah, David said. Yeah.
Paulo, yeah.
Hello, I'm Paulo from Brazil. Yeah, I want to come back to the importance of the body in relation to ourselves and in the relations to the connection with the others. There is an inner capacity of ourselves that's called interoception. It's the perception of our inner status of our body. So my question is in relation to that. For if interoception, it's a little technical, but this kind of quality that we can really perceive what's happening inside of our bodies is not a way of connecting, of healing in interconnection with the others.
You want to respond?
가자.
나는 그 세리가 돈에 Interception slap je koranse samjtan gore seni nalo ya dina an su lug nalo ya cho kar chuma jun sor tunye shi lo mo je che to ya de bana na za na ngasa na mo je che to ya da interception se jores tizana da ji
그래서 초와도 두시 예요.
그래
그래.
다이나 단도 mo je che to mo do tane kibamedo
Interoception.
You want to explain a little bit, yeah.
Yes, interoception is the perception of bodily cues. For example, being able to perceive your own heartbeat, perceive your gastric motility, the changes in your stomach. So those perceptions of these changes in bodily state are interoception.
가서.
근데 수부 나로를 닝 파르데 파르주다. 아니 저거 나로야 데치티게디야. lötona 문제 제도 맞추기. that 문제 제 차이는 저봐. 텔레야 interceptions la goresa.
And there's actually research that shows that a person's ability to perceive her or his own body in this interoceptive way is associated with their empathy. People are more accurate empathically if they could perceive their body more accurately.
This is
류 전반이서 소 전반이서 또 저면 되게
라레
그때 인규도 그 정신 싱그러
라레
레디네 담이 세게 돼야지 로로 대체
라레
소 전반이서 삽스르면도
Yes. So in the Buddhist tradition, of course, I mean, these are premised upon basic abilities that we have, but then in the mindfulness meditation, there's a very specific practice focused on just the bodily sensations. And, by choosing body as a special focus, same thing applies to choosing emotions and feelings as a special focus. But the basic ability must be there as human beings.
This is the challenge in this work on Ubuntu, this idea of looking at what is a moment-by-moment transformation when you encounter a situation where your very definition of yourself is challenged. In other words, you consider yourself a good human being, but then you are in a situation where all sorts of negative emotions are evoked. It's challenging, not difficult, to think about what is the moment by moment when you are engaged in looking at another person and, thinking about transformative moments. When is the turning point moment that actually allows you to cross that hurdle, to become that something else? And His Holiness is right in saying that you have to have it, first of all. And I really think that the having it in this context of Ubuntu, you have it because you are brought up with it. You have witnessed how it works. You've witnessed how the parents relate to others. You have it. It's intrinsic in the very sense of who you are. And so you draw from it at those moments. And that when you're thinking about when something happens, you're looking at someone, they say something, they say, I'm truly sorry. It's the difference between understanding something as genuine and not genuine. And I think actually even more than empathy, the body, yes, the body has a role in empathy, but there's something else that sometimes, words and these scientific definitions fall short in describing what it is that happens, because there's something about this being positioned as a subject in relation to another and how you respond. It's more than perspective taking, right? Empathy, there is perspective taking. But here there is that moment where something, shifts the eyes, what you say, and it moves the body. This is why the women say it is in him, but they locate it. Almost like some of the women say it's behind the navel. Something that moves. Why is it that something moves? It's because there is a knowing. There is a knowing that is beyond this moment where we are in conversation. It goes beyond. It's a community. It's wider than the now.
세력도는 제바집을 다니면 비지고 때 제바제세 시대 냠뇨다 뇨어와 뇨어리디 이거 쳐봐가 또는 제샤마도 배나 perspective taking the empathy 다니 비지베네 뇨베 제가 리버 레레네 대운도 가야 대세적 하고
Okay, we have another question.
I think David had his hand
Oh,
up.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
A couple of things struck me. One is that apartheid came about because of a policy. It was created. It was a system that was created by humans. It was kind of suffering that was intended, and it was created. And my first question is, how do we disrupt the tendency to create apartheid kinds of positions? There was a kind of systems or policies. The second question I have is when I think about these women and I think about this suffering, it seems to me that suffering is a kind of suffering that doesn't go away. And if Ubuntu calls us to share that suffering, then we have a collective kind of suffering that may not turn to despair, but the suffering doesn't go away, that we hold that suffering perhaps for much of our lives. When I think back to the conversation between Desmond Tutu and His Holiness, they also called us to a place of joy. So how do we hold this notion of suffering that we may in fact embody, but also envision lives of joy at the same time? If you believe that premise that we might be holding suffering, perhaps for all of our lives, and that we at the same time pursue joy.
I think you should start. The apartheid charge, apartheid thing, and me children in the sojo, policy to the sojo, and at South Africa, Miriam, the me shiggling at the day, to me, and to Susuegi, Commissioner, that you do my Tapshi Carriers, to which that you never did, and the young Jacan to Galia, the Bishop to the coming up a couple of years, the Kandachina Milia to me, Horace, to me that kind of Ted members, you members of the Inea, the joy de Kuyores, Mizinavoya, joy, the Gawa, and Dewa, the kind of dig.
Thank you, Holiness. Ed, I'm hearing you to be asking a question about how do we hold the possibility of hope in the midst of suffering. This idea of connectedness to others, I see it as a possibility of building a sense of solidarity so that it is through this solidarity that we care enough for the other, that we are concerned about issues of social justice, that it is precisely in that sense of brokenness that the emergence of this possibility of solidarity comes about, because that becomes then a guiding principle for us to care enough for one another, to understand, first of all, that this doesn't go away. I mean, we've witnessed this in South Africa. There are other factors that I don't want to go into them now, but the reality of structural injustices, and so the call to an ethical humanity, the call to a connection to others through this work of Ubuntu, thinking about Ubuntu, really is an invitation towards a sense of solidarity with the other, because it's through that there's a commitment to engaging in issues of social justice, so that we care enough for the other to really rise up and stand up for the importance of justice, social justice for the other. The other question, your other question of how do we hold the space when we are talking about disrupting these tendencies. In my university, Stellenbosch University in Cape Town, which is a diverse, most of the universities are diverse, there are all these structures that are built around the university to enable this idea of a practicing, kind of an awareness that we can be mindful of the idea of caring for the other. It doesn't, as you know, human beings are so complex, but what the university, my university, is doing, there are these spaces, transformation office, for example, that is built into the way the university is working. The transformation office, there's a director of transformation. And the role of that person is to create spaces like this so that people can engage with one another, experience one another, and experience the possibility that actually it is possible to reach out and connect to the other person, even though apartheid has divided us. And the danger of these histories is that apartheid is a word that means separateness, but actually it also is a splitting of the mind, that there's a group of people that I'm connected to, there's another group that I exclude from the realm of moral humanity. And so we have to realize that the divisions are very deep in the mind, deeply embedded. And so this is why at my university we have these structures that almost force people to test out, to take the risk of engaging so that they can rediscover their sense of humanity.
May all universities appoint directors of transformation.
Mara University, they have the Department of Transformation.
Your Holiness, one of our values is compassion. One of our university's values is compassion.
Hello.
그지 그런 맛이 지수도 그래.
Good morning. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to ask a question. This conversation is particularly close to my heart because I come from Bangladesh, which is also a country which has survived genocide. So thank you, Pumla, for the wonderful work that you do, and thank you, Your Holiness. My question is about the two concepts that you talked about, ahimsa and karuna. And you said that this applies more to others, those who are unlike us, because we don't expect betrayal from those who are close to us. But oftentimes, data says, and also from lots of experience, we've noticed that those who are close to us are oftentimes responsible for the harm that is caused to us. So how might we, a lot of people would say, a lot of people would argue that this kind of betrayal is much more harder to forgive. I wanted to know your opinion on that, if you would share your views. Thank you.
And then ahimsa says something on corona ya shala tell me just like you galia ranganye get member to shandal the data the daily data kanang sons the yene ya moyone zuchile mangbuchi sem ke kangere luke kanger nebo mangbuchi susu ye nye to the to na kang take or was and to zulia soba tangla jet tianye kale che yores because susu da kada 가사 맞아 우리 지금은 아주 가사 가사 간다 팬데 버려쳐 가시 신도 메르네 잖아 신년 담다 와서 디나신 간다 수수 줄로께서 다 제와샤서 들리지 촌네버게 되고 네버디 띵사바다 텔리아 서버 당한 때 카와도 왔던 두두토리아 탑시 가리어나스
더 지용 그 간다 참질로 장해야지 아니 땅용 그셈 그냥 쭉 전에는 라진진기 경 현진진기 연대 또 조주자 야고 상당 그러니 또 대바시 그런 담바로 지정게 현지번 좀 저거 소소 디지 연대 아주 샤샤래 아니 랑지번 준비 아니 지 거의는 지저도 지금도 자대하지 산타 디로 심을디 야고 장의 연나 내가 강도 수동 쪽에서等于군에 만들지 상 사바 타고 쳐도 좀 쉬었어 다전에 마찬가지 강나다게 판다고 하면 저거 건시 신도미리 내진나 신인다 뭐 따오셔서 다 믹스센 로자야
so here the
들어 주주도 소리를 랑그 자디 계신이 좋으셨어
so the basic understanding is really a cultivation of your mind generally, to be able to have a sort of an outlook that you cultivate, which would ideally involve a way of, having less self-focus and less self-centeredness, but emphasizing more awareness and concern for others' well-being, so that you take into consideration others' experience and your impact on others as well. The more you do that, but that would require, again, as a precursor to this, a fundamental recognition of the equality of yourself and others, insofar as the aspiration to seek happiness and wanting to avoid suffering is concerned. That really is the basis. So on that basis, then you develop your attitude and perspective so that you are less self. So there is a beautiful passage in quite a popular Tibetan prayer where it says that when it comes to suffering, I do not even want a tiniest one. When it comes to happiness, I'm never satisfied by enough. In this, there is no difference between myself and others. So may I be blessed so that I can take joy in others' happiness. So this is the attitude that really needs to be established as the basis. And then once you have that kind of attitude where your basic tendency would be to less self-focused, be more bringing consideration of others. And when you have that kind of attitude, then dealing with the more difficult ones that you are referring to, where there is a line in the 8 verses of Training the Mind where it says that with relation to some people in whom I have placed my trust, when they inflict me pain, may I be even more compassionate towards them. So, and this also brings up the basic idea in the Shantideva's text that, among all the teachers, teaching you compassion and patience, the most important one is your enemy, because the enemy is the one who's giving you the opportunity. So then these kind of attitudes and practices become more doable. But the most important thing is really establishing that basis.
The Shantideva also explained, you see, anger, suspicion, jealousy, these are worst kind of mental sort of situation
states
which disturb our peace of mind. So the antidote, these things are patience. There is patience, more patience, then tolerance come. So from Kasoda.
Who will provide love?
Oh.
Who provides the opportunity?
Oh. So the enemy. So since these sort of practice of
qualities,
forgiveness, these things are something useful. That opportunity creates by your enemy. So enemy is your good teacher. Wonderful.
Yes.
So instead of sort of negative feeling, you must feel grateful. You provide me that opportunity. Thank you.
Yes.
So that's the attitude, yeah.
So, Your Holiness, yesterday you gave many wonderful examples. You brought us to examples that this happens. So you are reminding me of examples of exactly what you're talking about. 2 young women, their parents were killed by Eugene de Kock, whom I write about in the book. They were babies. They don't remember their fathers. One of them is Candy's mama. And she goes through this teenage life of anger. And then in her later years, in her 20s, she goes to visit the killer of her father. And in a way, it speaks exactly to what you're saying, because she goes there and she says, I want to forgive you, because she wants to transcend this tightness, this wall that kind of was standing between her and happiness. So we have those examples as well.
So in many of these cases, it's really the perspective that you take. And often when you overemphasize I, then invest too much in that self-focus, then it opens to all sorts of problems.
I think the other day I mentioned, you see, effect from practice of altruism, then eventually whole phenomena appears you something positive. Then no basis of anger, jealousy. This is so long, too much of the emphasis, me. Then whole phenomena appears something negative.
So there's a same text that His Holiness was referring earlier as the line which says that excessive self-focus is the door to all the miseries, and focus on others' welfare is the door to all the happiness.
What would
I very much want is to seek some support from brain specialist. The more compassionate mind, more altruism, how much effect, positive effect to brain. And too much self-centered attitude. And then anger or suspicion, distrust. These, how much effect or negative effect of brain. That I want to know from my longtime friend. So that is the additional my sort of weapon.
Ammunition now.
And Your Holiness, there is a lot of growing evidence, some of which you're already aware of, and some new that does suggest that the cultivation of compassion through training the mind has beneficial effects on the brain and the body. And one of the most exciting new areas of research is in the area of inflammation, which is something important for many chronic illnesses, including inflammation in the brain. And it seems that among at this point, only a small number of meditation practices that have been studied scientifically, compassion practice has the most impact on decreasing inflammation, which is going to have impact on reducing neurodegeneration, brain disease.
Kasa.
The inflammation liya shukyen teya the gom grig na one ningji gomete shukyen chesho tego yosare stati ketenden demba inflammation gtone gene grig mang bujorwa tembalaya da level ya login be julia tende inflammation ki chagen tego yodugal inflammation wa nyurtan tobe na de jutolya tende kebaj to yosare.
And we can take one or two more questions. So, David, please.
Yes, Pumla, you said that Ubuntu has been written into the South African Constitution, and you've given very powerful examples at the interpersonal level. But why hasn't it led to a better outcome at the political level? Why has apartheid been largely replaced by corruption?
That's a very important question, and one that's... Yes, okay. And one that continues to occupy our minds. Why is it that our leaders in the country, instead of reaching out in the way that Nelson Mandela did not do that? Why are they drawn to the other side of corruption, of destroying and selfish interest? And it's a question that I am not able to answer except to say, the bad people in the world are always there. It's just very disappointing where such a powerful example in our country was led by Nelson Mandela was not embraced over the years because the leadership was taken over by other people who are different, who've got different agendas. And the consequence, in fact, is a question that I was going to ask you, Richie. How do we, because now we face in our country with the reality of suffering, persistent suffering, and people not seeing the light on the other end of the tunnel because the resources have been drained. How, in science terms, in your work in science, it's possible to imagine training people, creating groups, training people. But when you think about communities in the society where people are living the consequences of structural oppression and continuing corruption in the post, oppression era? Because now we're not talking about apartheid. We're not ignoring the transgenerational impacts of depravity, a life of deprivation into the present moment. But how do we then really encourage this kind of work, the scientific work, when the reality, the day-to-day reality in large communities is that people are living within structural brokenness?
I mean, I certainly don't have any answers, but I am inspired. I mean, here I'm inspired by His Holiness's emphasis on education. Corruption is learned. It is not something that is in our nature. And if it can be learned, then if we focus on younger people who are by nature not corrupt, if we can nurture those positive qualities that they come into the world with, we have a chance of at least minimizing the likelihood of subsequent corruption.
And yet, institutionalized education, certainly in the States, is exactly what you're describing. It's situated, it's set up. There are islands, it's true, where there is compassion. But the actual systemic forces that keep institutionalized education in place, public schools, we're training children to become materialists and to participate in an extracting society that extracts human resources and all kinds of resources. And until those structures change, I have a great concern that we won't find ways to introduce the kinds of education that we know works. So I don't have an answer either to that. But the hope I have is that there are human beings who are running these systems. And I imagine that that people change, and they can change.
I think key thing is education. That's why I think the other day I mentioned.
Yeah. It's so hard.
So existing education, so-called modern education, not adequate. We should bring healthy students. Because existing education very much oriented about material value, not talking about this inner value.
That's right.
So that I often used to telling people, in order to create a happy world, key thing is compassion, love. That from education, through education, we should teach these things. Not talking about God, not talking about Buddha or next life. Just day-to-day life. More warm-heartedness, so you feel happy. And wherever you go, sort of this feeling, you immediately make friend. Just education, or materialistic education. And then not very sure. You always sort of calculate, if I make friend this person, what I get benefit. And whether there is possibility, explore the other.
Exploit.
Exploit. So these things, I feel, existing education is, I think, they have the responsibility. That the modern education, very much oriented about material value. Now in education, I think the other day, also I mentioned, is from kindergarten, we should teach children the hygiene of physical, similarly, hygiene of emotion. That's very important. Strictly academic subject, not a religious subject. That I think the other day I mentioned is I'm hoping India, these are their sort of traditional knowledge. So it is easy to
Implement.
include
Yeah.
in education or sort of
Curriculum, yeah.
So then once India, through education, you see the combination, material things, science, technology, and then meantime, how to keep peace of mind. Then India can show rest of the world. I think Mahatma Gandhi ji spent some time in Africa,
yes.
isn't it?
Yes,
There's
in
some
South
influence
Africa,
there.
yes.
So therefore, education is the key factor. So all these, like it's a particle. You see, this thing useful for body, this harmful for body. So all these, you see, brain, kasota, use brain.
To differentiate. To differentiate
knowledge.
Yeah.
So similarly, among the mind, among the emotion, this emotion useful, this emotion harmful, including physical health. Through education, we can change. So, and then here, I think the other day I already mentioned, say, I'm seeking help from scientists. If you see people say, oh, Buddhist did like that, and then people say, oh, nice. Not necessarily bring conviction. The scientific finding, very detailed explanation, then the people pay more attention. I feel like that. So I really love scientific research and science. Therefore, I usually describe myself half Buddhist monk, half scientist. This is science. You see, it's not because of the blind faith.
Science has no blind faith. Yeah.
Oh. I often used to telling Buddhist community, you see, and according to Nalanda tradition, just faith not sufficient. We must keep the word why. That's very important. Buddha himself, you see, told us, oh my follower. I think the other day I mentioned it. The Buddha himself, you see, expressed, oh my follower should not accept my teaching out of faith, out of devotion, but rather thorough investigation and experiment. That's very good, very scientific. Saying I'm going to look into Kasa. Teacher Lord Dundenda Namda Riga Teacher Keki Lord Dundenda and Namda Ribe Lord Mixonla Peggy Giver Menuve Demenar never Demo Sol said Payado.
So His Holiness, this reminds His Holiness of a passage from Lama Tsongkhapa, which is at the beginning of a text, and he's going to be giving a teaching at another place tomorrow, which is more appropriate. And he's thinking of,
and Pearl Mudu Yamaris, and the Shawa came in those lovely Mudis Unere Menere, Madusum Gul Paja Yaris, today you to cover the Shinko, and Dom de Gunner.
So at the beginning of this text, he's actually taking the reader deeper into levels of analysis and, sort of deconstructing positions that we might adopt and be attached to and reify. So then the question was raised, well, since some of these positions are held by non-Buddhists in India, and since Tibet has no non-Buddhist, why would one want to be taken through this process? And Tsongkhapa says, yes, there may be no physical presence of these upholders of these views, but the tendency to hold these kind of views lies in all of us. So the going through this deconstruction process is important. So he says that in that a beautiful verse, then he summarizes it. He says, dear friends, he says that, what you need to do is to harness the power of your, intellect, critical intellect. And then, and then open your eyes with a series of asking questions. And then seek a genuine sense of firm conviction in your understanding of the essential points of the Buddha's teaching, such that no other opposing views could assail you. So there's this kind of
deep probing and probing.
So of course here Tsongkhapa is not saying, have faith, believe in me. He says, use your mind, use your intellect.
That's right. We have one more question in the back that I know you've been patiently waiting.
Oh, thank you, and
Then
gratitude.
Geshe-la.
Oh, great. Gratitude, Pumla, and Your Holiness. Pumla, you were mentioning that in some local dynamics, there may be a need for more than training, that there's something about the power of witnessing shared experience in shared space, which I think probably relates to your notion of the importance of embodiment. And I'd love to hear more about what you mean by the local context requiring that shared experience and how you've seen that transformative work.
When we witness stories of others, the lives of others, there is always this possibility that we might be touched by them. And depending on how these stories connect with our own history, it may open up the emergence of the unexpected, which is a phrase I use in my work, the emergence of the unexpected, that it is in these moments of witnessing that draw us into the life of the other. It's almost as if you are reconstituting the self in relation to the other, reconstituting yourself by relating to what the story is and what it means for you, and what rises out of that, what emerges out of that might just be that moment of connection. I write about it as a possibility that often people think about these processes as, thou shalt, you must do this, you should do this. But it's the potential. It's really, when we create the space, you're opening the space for that possibility to unfold. And until we do that, we will not know. We will forever be saying, you are other, you are this, you are that. And until we bring that moment, those moments where we can have these shared moments that open up the possibility. And of course, the hope is that there will be the achievement of that, what's possible. And so that's what I mean by witnessing. And that's what Ubuntu means. It's witnessing, and the reciprocal, mutual witnessing of the other that creates this sense of community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Geshe Samtia.
Is about the black man who brought the children to the police and betrayed them. You might have had a very close interaction with him. So I'm just wondering what brought him to come up with this kind of proposal and to seek forgiveness and make his forgiveness in front of the parents. Is that due to some social or cultural pressure from outside, or it is due to his regretness, or out of compassion that he developed in course of time?
I think it may be all of these things. It may be, the sense that I have to make amends because now I'm living in a world where my shame is out there in the world. So there's something about reflection as well, that's the reflection on the things that you have done and how you are positioned in terms of that history and wanting to make amends on the one hand. On the other hand, is the real concern that that other process has evoked for the other, for what you have done. That's how remorse comes about. It's when you are focusing on not on the self, but on the other. A lot of the time, we are wounded because we are afraid of our shame. And for as long as we are afraid of our shame, you can't reach out to another. You just don't have it in you to connect to them. But the moment you accept your shame, you are facing it. And then it allows you to understand exactly the consequences of your behavior on the other. And that then opens the door for you to reach out to the other to say, this is what I've done, and I recognize what I've done. And then, of course, I want to join you on this journey to rebuilding our community. It comes back to the self. I want to be part. I want to re-enter the realm of moral humanity. I was operating under this dehumanization. Remember that these people redefine morality. What is good, under those circumstances is to murder the enemy of the state in the case of these people. But now this other world has been opened. They're now confronting. It's not that they didn't know. They kind of knew and they didn't know because they was in a group that encouraged this dehumanization of self and other. But now another community has been created. It's the time where we are reflecting on this past, and that allows them to wish to join this realm of moral humanity.
Thank you, Pumla. Thank you.
Black man, black women,
forgive morang drum drum the middle
I understand. It's fine.
So we're about to come to a conclusion. Pumla, as we leave, I would like to ask you, just briefly, because our time is coming to a close. The most important thing that I can think of leaving this group with is this distinction between repair and forgiveness. You have said in conversations that we've had, you've made the distinction between forgive and forget and the ongoing nature of repair. And I'm wondering if you can just leave us with that thought before we conclude. It's something we can all take with us.
Aaron, Your Holiness is talking about my conversation with the work of forgiving that I myself have done, and coming to a realization that there is a problem with this word because it suggests a terminal point, like now we've done it, we've got to move forward. And it's misleading in contexts such as our context because the work of repair has to happen. Ed was talking about how suffering stays with us, precisely because suffering stays with us. The limitations of these words, forgiving, really shine through because forgive often is related to the idea of, even the word I have forgiven, it's like it's in the past. And that repair is like an ongoing, it's a challenge, it's a call to engage every day, to engage with this idea, to be mindful constantly that there is suffering out there and there's work to do. And I think this is the most important thing that we can do for ourselves and in solidarity with the suffering other, is to repair and to think about this word, repair, rather than forgive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
네, 큰지. 그래. Right.
Thank you.
Your Holiness, before we conclude this morning, I want to give you an opportunity to share some final reflections if you would like.
No, nothing. My brain thinking food. So in any way, this kind of meeting, very useful. This morning, I suggested because of Mind and Life, this kind of meeting.
Meeting with the board of Mind and Life, His Holiness suggested.
I already know some contact, some Russian, Moscow University, some professor should carry some sort of research work about mind or these things. So then eventually, I think our work for humanity, not just one individual sort of city,
country or community.
So then, Japanese, and also Chinese, and Vietnamese, Korean, traditionally, they should know about the system of mind, because this is a Buddhist country. But they are not much pay attention, just a faith. So I want invite from this country. Let them see our sort of sophisticated discussions. So our work should also expand. Our aim also, you see, humanity. So the participant also, you see, the kind of michi.
Since our aim and work is really for the humanity as a whole, the composition of the representation at the discussion should also reflect that.
So now common thing is food.
It's finished.
Final words.
So Your Holiness, I will just end by expressing heartfelt gratitude to you. You've been so generous with your time, with opening your home to us, and for sharing your wisdom, and for listening and engaging in this conversation. It really means a lot to all of us in this room, and also to the many thousands of people that are watching. And we're also recording this for Mind and Life education resource that we're going to be sharing with many, many people for years to come. And so until we get together again, we wish you very good health.
Thank you.
Yes.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Much love.
Thank you.
Next few years, I think 10, 15, maximum 20 years, say my body okay. So we can take this kind of meeting several years. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Holiness.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to do later.
그래, 큰일 났다 가말해.